So we have a little delay in starting the show because we also have an in-person audience coming in. So we are waiting for them to check in and do their machine setup. So it'll take quite of time. So let's start the event in another 10 minutes. But before we start, let's begin with our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together. So please be respectful of other people's views and their understandings. Be kind and considerate in the way you all engage. And obviously, we do encourage you all to participate. Please, online audience, have all your questions in the chat section. And in-person audience, please do let us know what all questions are there. It will be covered soon as the topic goes on. Please maintain silence during the session. Thank you. We'll see you back in another 10 more minutes.
Actually, when they started, there was no voice.
Yeah. To give your introduction to our online audience.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tulika. I'm a product manager with Linux App Services. And today I'm here to talk about how to use Go on Azure App Services. So I just have a couple of slides to walk through.
You need to share your screen.
Oh my God. What is happening to this idea? I'm not the only Windows guy in this.
We're having some technical problems. Just a couple of minutes.
You.
Nish.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you bring the slide up?
So we're going to start with what is the Azure Application Platform. Now, some of you might have used Azure earlier, but in case you haven't, this is our entire portfolio of products and services that we have. Right at the beginning, we have something called the infrastructure as a service, which is basically you can deploy your own VMs and you can then deploy and manage your code. If you deploy your own VMs, you are actually managing your VM for yourself. It's just that it's rather than a machine which is on your premise, it is in our data centers, but you have to do everything else to make sure that you manage the VM. What I'm going to talk about, or what I specialize in, is PaaS, or Platform as a Service. PaaS is the third most used Azure service. And basically what PaaS does is that it still deploys your code on a VM, but you don't need to be bothered about your VM. We will manage it for you. So you can just bring your own code. You can deploy using various methods. You can use GitHub, you can use DevOps, whatever you want. And we will take care of maintaining the platform for you, which includes updating the platform, making sure that the OS has the right security fixes, and making sure that there is availability and SLA being met for your application. We also have things like container platform as a service. So if you've worked on Kubernetes, that's another thing that you can deploy on Azure. We have a contract with Red Hat. So we have the Azure Red Hat OpenShift. And as platform as a service, we also allow you different other services like Spring Apps. In case you've heard about it, you've got Java Spring Apps that you want to deploy on us, or Azure Container Apps. Now, whether you deploy a Java Spring app or a container app, it all essentially works on app service. So if you will, a container app or a Spring app is using the base layer of app services and running on top of it. You might have also heard about functions, which is our serverless offering. So in case you want the serverless offering, you can use function as a service. Again, that runs on our PaaS offering, which is app services. We, of course, have the entire tooling for app services, which is you can use any kind of IDE that you want, any kind of build tools that you want, and any kind of deployment mechanisms. App services, firstly, what we let you do, since it is a PaaS environment, what we let you do is that you can bring your code in any of the languages that you have. So .NET, Node, Java, Ruby, Python, Go, and we will let you deploy the code. There are two ways of doing it. One is that we control what environment we have, so we control the exact versions, and you can choose the versions from a drop-down list, and I'll show you how you can do that. Or if you don't like what we have and you want to get something which is very specific to you, in that case, you can deploy your own container as well. So you can get your code, you can get your SDK, you can get the language that you want to use and deploy it as a container on us, and we'll manage the platform for you. We also let you have some good features, which is like having slots for staging and development. So a lot of customers want to test their code before they go live, and slots is a good way to do it. We allow features like test in production. So this is not exactly an app service session, it's more of Go, but I can share some documentation in case you want to read about app services or want to just try it out. So that's all I had as far as slides was concerned. And let's now move on to looking at the Azure portal. So this is the Azure portal. It's portal.azure.com. And if you have a subscription already, in that case, you can access the portal directly. If you don't have a subscription, you can sign up for one and you get 200 free credits to start with. So we'll go ahead and try to create a resource. So the first option is, first, before you deploy something, you should be creating a resource. So you can click on Create Resource. And this will give you a list of all the resources, but it sorts the resource in the most used or the most popular ones. And you can see that web app is right there on the list. So we can click on the Create button over here. So this is a standard screen on how you create any kind of Azure resource. So the first thing is that you have to have a subscription on the basis of which you're going to create your resource. This is what is going to be used when you sign up on the Azure portal. The next thing is creating a resource group. A resource group is a logical collection of all the resources that you're going to have for your application. So this could be your web app, it could be your database, it could be some observability streams. So whatever you want, you can group it inside a resource group. So we can create, for the moment, I'm going to just do a new resource group, and let's say, I'm going to create a new resource group. The next thing is that you can specify your web app name. Now, since we are doing on Azure App Services, whatever name you give, we will automatically register a domain for you. So this domain you get free and out of the box. So you can do ABC and we'll give you azurewebsites.net. So that's available out of the box. You can also get your own custom domain, and a lot of customers will do that you can get yourname.com. So over here, we'll just create a new web app. And we'll see if the name has to be unique, because remember, it's a domain has to be unique for it to be identified. And then you'll see a number of options over here. So you can deploy your code just as your code, and that is what typically customers do. However, if you want a little bit more control, or maybe you want a specific version of Go, in that case, you can deploy your own Docker container. So that's, in that case, you would have to do some extra work, like you have to create a Docker file, have to make sure that it works before you can get it over here. But if you don't want to do that, if you just have a code, you can just say code. And then we have the runtime stacks, which is available. So you can see over here that this is the entire list of runtime stacks that we support. We support all the major LTS and STS versions of Ruby, Python, PHP, Node, Java, Go, and .NET. So you can choose one of these versions and you can make your app. Now, sometimes, for example, over here, we are saying we support Go 1.18 and 1.19. Let's say you want to create an app, 1.20 is already available. It's in preview mode, but it's available, and maybe you want to use that. That's the case, you probably want to get your own Docker container and not use what we provide. So here we're going to just use what we provide, which is 1.19. You can now choose your operating system. Now we support Linux and Windows because ultimately an app service is going to run on a VM, and the VM has to have an operating system. So it could be Windows or Linux. For Go, only Linux is available because that's how we've deployed it. We could have Windows at a later point of time, but right now that's not under consideration. You have to choose the region in which you want to create your app service. So the region could be, if you have a drop down, this is where our data centers lie. So you can choose whichever region is, you probably want to choose the region which is closest to you, or at least closest to the customers who are going to be accessing your web app. So I'm just going to go with East US. And then you can choose your Linux app service plan. Now, Linux app service plan defines what kind of VM or computing power you're going to need. So you can do a create new over here, and you can give a name. And let's say I say okay. And as soon as you choose over here a new app service plan, you can see that you have various pricing options available. So you can say that, I don't want the current option that you're giving me, which is basically the premium tier, and you don't want the premium tier. So you can choose something which is an older, a less tier. So we also have a free offering in case that's what you want to try. So you can have a free offering that's absolutely free for a lifetime. So you can try that. However, we don't recommend you try it for production apps. So this is just a playground, so you can try it. We also have a basic SKU, which is our standard A-series VMs. So in case you, again, mainly for trial, for testing, but a little more horsepower than your premium tiers. So if that's what you want to do, you can choose this, which is our A-series VM. And our premium services run on D-series VMs, which means that it has better compute power. So I'm going to, stay ahead with premium tier. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and, use the same app service plan I was using earlier. And I'm just going to go ahead and change this. So I'm not going to create a new. I mean, you could do the create option, it'll work the same way. I'm just going to use an existing one right now. So I've chosen Premium V2, which is our D-series VM. This is the smallest VM size that we have. So you can see that it has 3.5 GB memory. It's a single core machine. However, since these are D-series VMs, these are pretty powerful machines. So in general, if you get a decent amount of requests, this should be enough for you. You can click on the deployment over here. So we allow you to set CI/CD right at the time when you're creating your app service. If you don't want to do that, and I'll show you how you can do it later. But right now you can set, if you wanted to do GitHub Actions, if you say yes over here for CI/CD, this will automatically populate your GitHub account and you can choose your repo that you want to deploy to. So you can create your app and deploy at the same time if you want it. You can also do some custom configuration. So you can see there is a GitHub workflow configuration, which is basically, do you want to run any steps post or pre-build? because when you do a deploy, we're going to build the app for you and you want to have some steps that you want to do. Maybe install something before you actually deploy your app. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to do a deployment right now because I'll show it to you later. And I'm going to just say review and create. So this is going to now create your app. So it's initializing deployment. Initializing deployment means it creates a template for you on what you've chosen with all the settings. And because this is PaaS, which is running on a VM, so it's going to go ahead and allocate a VM for you on which your app is going to run. You've also specified the name of your app, which is a domain registration. So therefore, we will go and make a domain registration for whatever new name you've chosen, .azurewebsites.net. And finally, after doing all these steps, it'll come back to you saying the resources created. Now, obviously, this is several steps, so it takes about a couple of minutes for the deployment to go through. In the meantime, did we have any questions in the chat? Okay. All right. So the deployment is succeeded. And you can just click right here and go to the resource. So you can see that your app has been deployed, and it gives you certain information about your app. For example, it tells you this is the name of your app, this is the resource group, remember that we chose, this is your app service plan, it tells you your operating system is Linux. That's what we wanted earlier. So it gives you some basic information, and we can click on browse right from here, and you can see that your app is already available, up and running. So this is just a standard landing page. You obviously haven't deployed any code. So this is your standard page and it comes through. Let's go ahead and prep our app for our code deployment. I'm going to try it from here because actually I can't see our side screen because okay. So I have a screen resolution set up to be really low, so it hides the side screens. So what we want to do is now prep your app to make sure that you can you can deploy your code. So we have to prep your app or do a couple of steps. It's not a whole lot. So we can go to Deployment Center. And if you go to the Deployment Center, you can choose from where do you want to deploy your app. So in this case, we are going to choose that we are going to use local Git for our deployment. So we'll choose local Git. I'm not going to go into how do you do Git. I'm assuming everybody knows how Git works. So you can choose local Git over here. And once you hit the save button, 7 things are going to happen. Just now setting up your deployment profile for you. So it says it's local Git. It gives you a Git clone URL because that's the URL we are going to be using in our app to deploy the code. It tells you that we are using Go, and I realized that we have a bug where we should have given the runtime stack, but we'll fix it. So it has given that, and you can also go to local Git and you can see the endpoints or the username password that you're going to use for Git deployment. So
this is for setting the Git repository.
This is for setting up the Git repository. Again, you don't need to use Git. I'm using local Git just because it's convenient. You can use DevOps. So remember when we were creating the app, you had all the options of doing DevOps, you had all the options of doing any other. You could even bring your own deployment mechanism and do it too. So, but we give you by default options for Bitbucket, Git, local Git, and the other Git and Azure DevOps. You could also do FTP deployment if you wanted to. We don't recommend it, but sure, you can do it. So our app is prepped now for deployment. Of course, we haven't written any code. So now let's go ahead and write some code. So firstly, now We are assuming, I think a question was asked before even we started the session, do we have to know Go? And it's yes and no kind of an answer, that you don't exactly need to know Go to deploy your app. You have tons of examples on the web. We are just going to do a very simple hello world right now. So we are going to create Go, and I'll walk you through the code or what we are doing in the code. So I've used VS Code, and I do have the Go extension installed for VS Code. You don't need to do that. You can use a text editor. You can use an online editor for Go. You have editors like REPL, which will create a Go and give you all the intelligence for it. But I'm going to go ahead with VS Code. So I'm going to create a new file, and let's say I'm going to name it main.go. And now it's asking me where do I put the file. So I'm going to just say this, and I'm going to create a new folder. So this is a main.go. All Go code file is with the extension .go. You don't need to name it main.go, but you have to have a startup file. So if you've used .NET, for example, your startup file is going to be like something like program.cs. In this case, main.go is your startup file. So that's something that you need to have, but you can define other classes and other methods in different files as well. So I'm going to create my startup file at the moment. I have some code over here, which I'm just going to copy into my startup file. This is some code that we have, and I'll walk you through a little bit of what we are doing in this code. So the first is defining the package. That's one thing, because Go is a package-based language. So the first thing that you have to do is name the package. In this case, it is main, because that's what we're doing, main.go. We also have an import statement over here. The import statement is what are the other libraries that you're going to use. This is like, hash include in .NET. So these are the libraries we are going to use. So we are going to use FMT and NetHTTP. We're using, FMT is where you have your print line statements. So that's for that. NetHTTP is in case you want to do any kind of TCP or connection-based code. We're doing a little bit of connection-based code. So all we are saying is you have a main function which is going to listen on port 8080. So we are saying handle function, the function that we are registering is called hello server. And we are saying call hello server at /, and the server itself is going to listen on port 8080. So that's all this, and obviously there's a line which says hello. So it's just going to print a hello message. It's a typical hello world code. So let's save this. And now a couple of things needs to be done before you can run it. So I'll go to our command prompt. And we'll just go to the folder that yeah. In that particular way, I created my main.go. So that's the file. Since this is a Go project, we have to run a command to make sure that Go gets initialized. So make sure our package gets created, our import statements get honored. So we have to do a command like go mod init, and we specify the name. In this case, I'm going to use main. So now it has created or initialized your project for you. You can go over here. What it's really done is created a mod file for you. So that the mod file is where it has initialized a project. You can open the mod file in a text editor or Visual Studio. And all it's done right now is specify that package you're using is main. Remember, we specified the package command there, and the version of Go that you're going to use, which is right now 1.19. Again, you don't need to. You can use a lower version like 1.18. Depends on what you have installed on the machine. Also, if you use editors like REPL, you don't have to install Go on your machine because then you are working online. So if you want to take advantage of that, you can do that. Here, I'm using VS Code, so I had to install Go on my machine. So once you have your main.go, I can just run it. And the command is just and again, I'm working on Windows. It's trying to, so the way Go works, it compiles it into an exe. So I'm basically, when I'm doing Go run, I'm actually executing an exe. And because it's a Windows machine and we have protection, it's asking you, can I add main.exe in my depender settings? So I'll say allow access. So while this is running, any questions? Any questions from the room?
So this we are building in the on the local machine, right?
This is right now on the local
So
machine.
we'll be testing it, but later on in the app, we need to do the build, or the build will automatically.
So the build is going to happen automatically over there, and I'll show you how to do the build. So right now, I don't know why it's taking so much time. So while this is taking time, let's go ahead and set up how we are going to do the build. I'm going to try and run this once again to see if it works. Okay, for some reason, it doesn't seem to want to show me the output right now, but I can go ahead and go into another project that I already have.
And what if you build in VS Code itself? Can we not do the compile build in VS Code itself?
I'm sure we can do it over here.
Right.
I haven't tried it out, so. You should be getting stuck somewhere. It's probably a permission issue on my machine. That's getting, because it's an exe. Go always compiles native code, which means that it's always going to do an exe. And because of all the permission issues we have on our machine, sometimes it just gets stuck. Okay, finally, it did run on the local machine if you're using VS Code. So it basically tells you that it's going to listen on 8080. We can now go ahead and hopefully browse to. You can see the hello message over here. And we can, just normal function that we can see whatever the message. So now let's go ahead and see how we can deploy it. Again, it's a very simple app, so it's just hello world. We're going to now see if we can deploy this. So the first thing we have to do is remember that we had prepped our app before we started doing all this work. And the prepping of the app was, we had set it for local Git. So we are now going to use the local Git. So this is the URL that we are going to deploy to. This is your Git URL. So I need to initialize my code. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, right now I did not add Git. If you had used an editor, it would have done the Git and all the good stuff for you. I did not add it, so I'm just going to do a git init. And then I'm going to add a remote endpoint for doing a Git deployment. I'm going to just name it Azure, could be anything. And I'm going to take this URL.
What does the add Azure thing do?
That's just naming.
Oh, that's just your local.
Yeah, just naming it. I'm just going to add a remote endpoint. And I can check the remote endpoint should have been added. So you can see your remote endpoint has been added. Now you have to do all the Git stuff, which is git add. I'm just going to add the code that we are using, and finally
You have to create a branch.
I have I'm just going to do a commit. I'll start the deployment and take the question. Just one more minute. This over here, I'm pushing to the remote that I've added. Now over here, it's going to ask for my grid credentials. And remember that when I initialized Git, it had the username password. And that's what we are going to use. So over here, you can go and see your Git username password. Typically, your username is going to be dollar and the app name. So we are basically doing it in the context of the app. So that's your username. And this is your password. I'm not going to show my password over here. I'll just copy it from here. So that's to make sure that Git gets authenticated for doing the deployment. And you can see that we've started pushing in our content to Azure. And to answer your question, this is now when we are doing the build. So you can see over here, we are preparing for deployment. We are finding the files. We are going through all the steps which would need to build a code. And this is going to take a couple of minutes while we go. So the question online is, why did it ask for firewall access? This is because I have Microsoft Defender configured on my machine. I work for Microsoft. We have to have Defender on all our corporate machines. And when you compile a Go app, it creates an exe, which means that you have to add a Defender endpoint to make sure that the exe runs. So that's why it was prompting me for. So this is now deployed your code. Now, when a code deployment happens, what essentially happens is you saw all these steps where it is going ahead and compiling you're building your code. Once it builds the code, it is going first, okay, I'll take it a step back. First thing it does is it creates a zip file, which contains all the files that you had in the folder that you're deploying. The next thing it does is it copies the zip file onto Azure App Services or our storage endpoint. That's where we keep our code. On the storage endpoint, it will go ahead and unzip the files, and then it is going to do a build. So those are the exact steps which is happening. Once it has done the build, it is going to restart your website to make sure it picks up the new build or new code that you've deployed, and then and then show your website. So that's everything which is happening in the background while you're doing your build. I'm just going to wait for one more minute because it's going to do all the steps in the background. In the meantime, we can say we don't need this screen anymore. And you can see your code has been deployed. So I can now go ahead and click on something like, and your code is already there on Azure App Services. So as you can see that taking the code from your local machine to deploying it to Azure App Service is really just a matter of setting a Git endpoint or an Azure DevOps endpoint or a Visual Studio endpoint. But whatever it is, that's the only step that you need to do. You have to make no change in your code whatsoever. You can just get your code and deploy it onto Azure. Any questions on this? Any questions from the? Okay. So for this, I've been walking through the quick start that we had over here, which tells you how to go ahead and create your sample app. It also gives you the code that you can use. And this is something that we would like you to try out over here. I'm also going to quickly show another quick start that we have in case you do have time. So this is a quick start. Now, in the industry, the typical use cases for Go is using either WebSockets or gRPC. So that's a typical application for Go. So over here, this quick start tells you how you can create a WebSocket application with Go. So we tell you over here how to create your Go app. And so right here, if you look at the code, and again, I can open the code, I've already got it deployed, but we would like you to try this. So you can go ahead and create your home page. You can define an endpoint that you want to listen to for a WebSocket connection. In this case, locally, you can listen to the endpoint 8081 or whatever endpoint you want. But for app services, we have a restriction that you have to use the endpoint 8080. So when you deploy the code, you'll have to change the endpoint to be 8080. And you can make sure with Go, you already have a package called Gorilla WebSocket. So we are using that package. There are other packages as well. You don't need to use this one. So if you're familiar with other packages, you are welcome to use it. And you finally go ahead and deploy your app in exactly the same way that we showed. You have to create a client because when you do WebSockets, you will do a communication between the client and the server. So this quick start also has the code in which you create a simple index.html. I'm sorry, I don't have any style sheets on it, so the index.html is not going to look very nice. But if you want, as an extra step, you can make it look nicer. And the important point in this code is it's doing a WebSocket connection. So we are using the protocol WS, which is for WebSocket, and we are creating a WebSocket connection. In this case, this is local, so use 127.0.0.1 and specify it's a WebSocket. If you were deploying it on Azure, you have to replace this with the Azure endpoint. Remember the domain name that we registered when we created the app. So it would be abc.azurewebsites.net. And that's all you need to know to create a WebSocket app on Go. So at this point, we would like you to try out these two tutorials. We have it in the, everybody has the links for it? No? Can we open?
Yeah. So let me. So people are here. You can go to that Learn at Reactor link, and you'll get these steps. You can try it out, right? I mean, it's few steps. Basically, you're going to create a sample app and try and deploy it on by yourself and see how exactly you will do it and how you can build an app and see how you can deploy a Go app into Azure App Service. And I've also given an advanced link, which is at the bottom, where you can also use the WebSocket thing, which Tulika just explained it. And people who are online, you can obviously try this out and post your questions in the chat while we are moving around and helping people who have joined us in person. You can ask questions here in the chat. If you are stuck at some point, we'll be able to help you. Okay. Um, just go to those links and get started. We'll be able to help you through chat. Okay.
Hey everyone, who all has joined us online. We'll be back in 20 minutes. We have in-person workshop going on.
Hey, all people who have joined us online, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have completed all this module which we have shared here. Uh, just share the feedback. That is the feedback link which I've shared in the chat as well, and also if you are able to see it on the screen. Share the feedback of this particular session, and thank you for joining in. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, and we are going offline. And people who have joined here will continue to work on this problem, and we close on this. Okay, thank you.